While they're setting up, I'm excited to introduce our next panel, Rethinking Cybersecurity Within an Artificial Intelligence Construct. So what I'll do is I'll introduce the chair of the panel, and then I'll let the chair introduce the other panelists. And so the chair is actually Nilu Razi Howe. So we were actually really excited to appoint her as a distinguished visiting professor in the College of Arts and Sciences back in 2023. And she's actually been a chair and speaker of the panels for the summit each year, going back to 2022. And so she's really a pro at facilitating these kinds of conversations. She's been an investor, executive, and entrepreneur in the tech industry for the past 30 years, with a specific focus on cybersecurity for the past 20. So really perfect for the kinds of discussions we're going to have today. She's an operating partner at Capital Meridian Partners, investing in companies at the intersection of government and technology, and she serves on a number of U.S. government advisory boards. Previously, she was the Chief Strategy Officer and SVP of Strategy and Operations at RSA, which is a global cybersecurity company where she led corporate strategy, corporate development and planning, business development, global program management, business operations, security operations, and federal business development. So before that, she was a Chief Strategy Officer of Endgame Incorporated and leading enterprise software security company where she was responsible for driving market and product strategy, as well as leading marketing, product management, corporate development, and planning. And so she has an enormous amount of experience across this field in many, many areas. And I'm really excited for this panel. So thank you so much.
Thank you for the introduction. And I just really want to thank Chairman Green for the incredible setup for this conversation. Over the past, I'd say, couple of years, every time I've been in a conversation about cybersecurity, inevitably there's a question that comes up at some point, which is, so what's the impact of AI on cyber? Well, the truth is, I think it's a markedly different landscape. It's not that AI is a tool in cybersecurity. AI is the terrain of cybersecurity today. It's a sword and a shield. It's offense and defense. And innovation is happening incredibly fast. That's the conversation that I want to explore today. And I really want to make sure that it is provocative and that we have fun up here. And it's going to be really important for the audience to be engaged. And please send us questions. They will be sent right to my phone, and I'd be happy to engage with them. To have this conversation, I'm thrilled to have three great panelists with us who come from three very different perches from which to look at this question. Far end, we have Thomson Paine, who is with Anthropic. He is the head of product and operations at Anthropic, but he also has a deep expertise in trust and democracy and policy. He is also an adjunct professor here at Vanderbilt University at the law school. We're thrilled to have Thomson here. Jeff Moss is basically OG when it comes to cyber. He is the founder of Black Hat and DEF CON. He understands cybersecurity inside out. He knows the hacker culture and will bring an incredible perspective and technical expertise to the conversation. And Frank has served in multiple administrations for various presidents. He is a policy expert with the McCrary Institute at Auburn. And we're thrilled to have all three of you here. So let me start with a very easy question. We know that AI is transforming cybersecurity, scaling attacks, automating breaches, automating defense to a large extent. What's the most dangerous shift AI has triggered in cybersecurity that we are least prepared for? Who wants to start? Jeff.
Oh, I mean, sure. The greatest risk, I say, is it's unleashed a mentality of great power competition and zero-sum thinking. Right? It's oh, we got to get some of that AI. Right? We're ahead. We're behind. How many months ahead must we be to win? How many weeks behind are we until it's catastrophic? And I mean, that leads to all kinds of crazy thinking and incentive models. And so I worry about where this great power competition in a particular technology leads us. Anyway, it worries me because it's a little bit different than great power competition with hyperscalers. We talk about US hyperscalers versus European hyperscalers. We talk about Chinese tech stack versus Western tech stack. Now we're hearing about a European tech stack. But in AI, it feels like it's up a notch. And so anyway, so I worry that that's going to lead to really kind of negative outcomes. And I think it's because there's not a whole lot of information. People are not super familiar with it. Like, for example, most of these conversations, I don't hear a lot of talk about model weights. You know, the proprietary information. I hear maybe something about model cards or data cards. But I just worry that, like, we don't have enough nuance yet to really have the conversation. And what China will claim victory in AI is going to be different than what the West claims victory in AI. It's going to be different than what Europe claims victory in AI. And so if I had to have a quick, brief moment, I will explain what I mean by that. Okay. China is a manufacturing superpower. Its social contract is predicated on the citizens' lives getting better in exchange for the CCP kind of running their lives. That means you need employment and you need to export, right? That's not the model in the West. So if I'm China and I get my hands on some of that AI, I'm going to sprinkle it on my robots and my cars, and I'm going to sell more robots and I'm going to sell more cars, right? Because I need to sell and I need to build. That's not the Western model. So when you see BYD releasing full self-driving AI software for free, and you see Tesla charging $10,000 for it, it makes total sense, right? And in that paradigm, China can get to a state where they're like, yes, we've won AI. Look, we're fully employed. We're exporting free AI bits. Great, yay, China. And in the West, we could be like, we're training bigger models. We're doing great scientific we're doing other things. Yay, America. And I think that nuance is lost when all we think about is great power, zero-sum game thinking.
So is it distorting our thinking with respect to great power competition and what it means to just focus on the AI?
I mean, I'm happy to have the conversation, but I want to hear what this guy has to say.
No, I'm going to take a little bit of a different perspective than Jeff, who I think the world of, and I actually think it is fueling the great power competition in a new kind of way, and this is a race we just cannot afford to lose. And I don't think you can have AI dominance without energy dominance. And quite honestly, our infrastructure is way behind. We heard Altman yesterday talk about that just briefly. Chris Miller had some great points that it's really about compute more than it is about modeling. But if you don't have the energy fueling all of this, we're not going to be the player we all want to be. When we think of cybersecurity in particular, we've all grown up knowing that the initiative remains with the attacker. I think when it comes to AI, we have an opportunity. Will the initiative always remain with the attacker? Yes, because speed is probably the greatest challenge we're dealing with right now. But I think Blue, the defender, can actually catch up if we do it right. I have a podcast that's brought in about 100 or so people from national security and industry. Every national security voice says red wins the AI battle. Every corporate entity tells me blue wins the AI battle. So I think, I do think that the greatest challenge is going to continue to be speed, innovation. Our defenses are going to have to be even more proactive than we're trying to struggle right now in the traditional cyber domain. But net, I think there's a chance that the defender can catch up.
So Thompson, you're now representing the AI.
Pressure.
You're the industry voice.
Panel, with the first question, I think there's a lot to comment on already. I mean, just to answer your first question directly on challenges that AI is introducing to the cybersecurity sphere, I think the one that comes to mind initially for me is just velocity and the pace of advancement and change we're seeing in this domain specifically. It's hard for any of us, including within AI labs, to wrap our minds around sometimes how fast this technology is moving. When we train new models, it reveals new capabilities to us once that model is ready, because we're still learning how these models and how this technology works, right? And so as you think about being in the practitioner sphere, being in national security, being in a corporation and thinking about cybersecurity, the new things that AI can bring to the space, to deployments, to risks, to offense, to defense, it's constantly changing. and not just how it is being used, but the underlying magic that drives new applications, drives new deployments is constantly changing, and we can't anticipate those changes month to month, year to year. And so if I were in the cybersecurity field, I would find that very intimidating. I don't know if we want to dive into the US-China competition stuff now, but certainly happy to go there when you want to.
I feel that may be an orthogonal conversation that we all want to have, but maybe we can save that for another conversation. So to pull on that thread for a second, in this environment where AI is evolving so fast, how much does adoption and agility matter versus raw model quality?
I think it's a great topic to dig into, as was mentioned here, this idea that kind of America, I'm not using your exact words, but America invents and China builds is a phrase you sometimes hear.
Yeah.
China didn't invent high-speed rail. China didn't invent solar technology, didn't invent electric cars, didn't invent high-end manufacturing, but it's leading the world in all of these fields, right? They've taken inventions from other countries, and adopted them more aggressively, built them and scaled them more aggressively and more successfully than in the West, right? And so as you think about the leading AI labs being in the US, which for the most part they are, that is inventing the best LLM technology, the best AI technology is different from deploying it. And so if we are slow to deploy the best frontier AI in the world, and an adversary is faster to deploy, even second tier AI, they still might have the advantage on us, both economically, commercially, and in terms of national security.
I actually have an example, maybe to make that a little bit more concrete.
Sure.
So I'm living in Singapore right now, and I've got a friend that manufactures a lot, fabricates in Shenzhen. And so he's telling me the story about how in his mind, NVIDIA's the business model is sort of built on this mountain of sand. And at any moment, their business model could be at risk because they're charging you like the maximum amount of dollars for a little bit more memory. And it has all this different floating point capabilities. But in China, they don't necessarily care. If you're manufacturing, you're doing inference. You don't need to build giant models. You just need to use models, right? The building versus the inventing versus the using. And so he was saying it would just take a company, a Chinese company, $1 billion or so to tape out a chip, ton of memory, FP8, floating point 8, that's it. For a fraction of the cost of what NVIDIA sells you, and they would put that in all the robots and all the cars, and then have a much less expensive GPU, much more profitable, much more usable for inference of these models. But that business model is opposite of what NVIDIA needs. They need to maximize returns on every single GPU. And are they going to create a super low-end inference-only model that it cannibalizes their existing? So he's really curious to see in China if they just roll out a competitor that really changes the model, the business of GPU market, right?
Can I, because I think there's great discussion, but history is filled with examples where it is the application of technology, not technology itself, that ultimately harnesses and demonstrates dominance in a particular sphere. All the way down to bow and arrow, to flint and gunpowder and the like. So I think I am worried about the day the Chinese stop stealing our secrets because they feel like they've got nothing left to steal. But the flip side is application is the name of the game here, isn't it? Because we are learning. It is adapting. Just the very science behind AI itself, and back to the first question, what we should worry about is the models themselves are learning. They're adapting. And if our defenses are static, if our defenses are reactive, it's always going to err on the side of the attacker. So the question is, how do we... I'm a big proponent. Admiral Rogers was a big proponent here in his commander's intent early on, General Nakasone later on the whole defend forward persistent engagement environment. I think it's even more apropos when we come to the AI sets of questions because we're learning as we go. You grapple with someone, you tackle with someone, you train with someone, you box with someone, and you learn. So to me, application shouldn't be underestimated. Quite honestly, I think it's probably the name of the game.
So let me ask a pointed question. We're kind of dancing around the edge of this one. Is AI being weaponized faster than it's being secured?
I don't know if it's being weaponized. It's being innovated faster than it can be secured. And one of the band-aids that people have proposed to sort of address this concern that I'm worried about is this whole concept of human in the loop. Right, we'll just put a human in there and it'll all be okay. You know, it's like, I don't know.
We have such a great OS, right? No flaws whatsoever.
Like, so how did that work out for, we heard from a speaker earlier, how'd that work out for Israel with, Where's Daddy and Lavender and all that stuff, right? The human is immediately overwhelmed. It's like, well, let's see, the company invested $100 million in this system, this model. It's got all these data feeds. It's been trained by the brightest minds, and it's spitting out these answers faster than I can comprehend them, and I'm just going to hit the stop button. Like, that's not going to work out for my career. And so when something goes wrong, who's going to get blamed? The non-deterministic AI system, where you can never reproduce repeatedly what it did, or the human? Right? You're going to interrogate the human. You could ask the human, what did you do wrong? Why didn't you respond? Well, it's all your fault. Or what are you going to do, have a conversation with the AI system? So I think, to take a term of art from Cory Doctorow, the human will become the crumple zone. Right? The AI system will persist, and the humans will be rotated through as the expendable excuse for whatever the failings of the AI system are. Because that's the best Band-Aid we've got for this fast pace of innovation. That worries me.
Can governance be another Band-Aid? And if it were to be a Band-Aid, would it come from the private sector or would it come from the public sector? Thompson, do you want to take that one on?
I'll take both questions on. I think to your question of whether the technology is moving faster than we can secure it, I think it's a very valid question, because we don't even necessarily know what it means to secure AI yet. We're still figuring out, again, you'll probably hear me belabor this point, we are still figuring out how this technology works. It is in still many cases a black box. We are working very hard to figure out how to align this to certain ends, to certain values, to even understand how to interpret outputs and how to steer this technology. And so combine that with the velocity at which it is moving, and then combine that again, this is a general purpose technology. So like electricity, frontier AI will be applied to many different domains. But the first domain that has truly found product market fit is in writing software, is in writing code. So the earliest place where you are seeing this really rapid takeoff is in writing code, is in cyber, right? With a technology we don't fully understand that is moving very rapidly. I think, to Frank's point, we will learn what security means as we have that boxing match out in the field, but that is truly moving really quickly. In terms of governance, I do think there's a huge role for governance here. And I think we are also, the challenge of governance, if it's coming from the public sector, from the government, which I think, I'll speak personally, I think we are a very big proponent of. But if it's moving so fast, governance structures you might put in today might not apply in 2 years, right? And you need the expertise to figure out even what the right governance structures are to put in place today, little less one that will work in 2 years, and 5 years, and 10 years, again, with technology moving this quickly. In the private sector, yes, I think there has to be some kind of self-regulation and self-guidance. But as we've learned in other areas of technology over the last 20, 25 years, that's really hard. So I think that's one of the big challenges we face.
Just to pick up on a couple of those points, and I think Chairman Green brought this up earlier today, and the rush to market sets of principles versus obviously looking at some of the guardrails and or the big R word, regulatory sets of issues. I mean, we're never going to keep pace with technology. I think anyone recognizes that. But there are principles that I think are worthy of looking at. And I think academia plays an important role in this, because I think Thompson rightfully touched on the only time you can really initiate change is at the coding level. Bottom line is the Department of Energy had a pretty big initiative called Cyber-Informed Engineering. Cyber is everyone's job. Mechanical engineers, EE, all of them have to be a little more informed in and have an awareness of the cybersecurity sets of issues as they're learning, as they're ultimately implementing. DHS had their equivalent, Secure by Design, which is also getting at the very left, left of boom in terms of all of these matters. But to think that Congress or the administration can ultimately drive that, I think, is kind of foolish. It's just going to move fast.
To give a quick example where our company has tried to lead on the industry self-regulation, we have something called a responsible scaling policy, which defines AI security levels that we think models will reach, what risks they will pose at those levels, and then we self-impose kind of restrictions on what we will deploy and release publicly when we hit those levels. I think that's the kind of thing we are experimenting with, being very public about, and want to iterate with other players in the industry and policymakers as we go.
Admiral Rogers yesterday talked about how bolt-on security after the fact is, we're living it in the internet, right? It doesn't work. Cloud, and there you are, Admiral Rogers. Cloud, to some extent, has flipped the script, right? Because it's adaptable, it's agile, it's observable, it's programmable. So you're seeing companies, to some extent, be able to bolt on security, whether it's Wiz, Orca, Tenable, and be much more effective than we were in a non-cloud architecture. A framework that's often used for AI, and Thompson, you're sort of hinting at it, is the Frankenstein analogy, right? AI is built from many parts. And it learns unpredictably, and it doesn't always do what its creator wants it to do. So my question is bolt-on possible even with artificial intelligence, or in an artificial intelligence world? Could there be a cloud analogy here?
Oh, okay.
And I know you disagree with my cloud analogy.
I have a cloud rant. But I guess the equivalent of bolt-on, and you're much more of an expert than I am. It would be you bolt on, you apply weights, right? So you have the model, you've trained it, but when you see models spitting out inaccurate information, they tinker with the weights and they try to improve it, right? It's cheaper than retraining the model for $500 million or whatever. And so I think in AI maybe. It's maybe some filtration at the prompt level, and it's some weights. But to your cloud analogy, if I'm going to hijack this just a little bit, there's this terror amongst cloud providers, hyperscalers, of ever speaking out loud of any vulnerabilities that they find. So, for example, let's say you're a hyperscaler and there's some, CPU defect that could be used to escape out of your, you are absolutely never telling the world that. Because the assumption will be, well, the other providers haven't said anything. They must be safer. And so there's this giant reward function for hyperscalers to never admit to any vulnerability. So I worry about that. And then the other thing I worry about is in cloud, right? The cloud is the terrain. It's so when Ukraine is on Microsoft Azure infrastructure and Russia is coming after them, they're fighting on Microsoft's terrain, right? It's not theoretical, Microsoft's there. Mm-hmm. And so then Microsoft studies that and releases some TTPs, and then the International Red Cross wakes up one day, reads the report, and they say, oh my God, we use Azure. Microsoft's a conflicted party. We can't use Microsoft anymore. They're not neutral. And then they look and they say, well, 120 of our providers are conflicted. Right? We are in an era now where everybody is conflicted. There are no unconflicted parties in technology, right? What does that mean? We don't know, right? And in AI, it's the same thing. You could use that AI for good. You could use that AI for bad, right? Anyway, I just think that moving to the cloud is not like the solution we wish it was.
But Nilu, if I could, I do like the analogy. The cloud, it does aggregate risk.
Right.
So if you get it wrong, you really get it wrong.
Yep.
But it does push the burden into the hands of those that are better prepared to deal with some of that risk, potentially. That begs the big question, and this plagues the cyber community, and it will the AI community, in my eyes. What are we trying to defend against? If it's the Black Swan incident, if it's the unique tactics, techniques, and procedures that the PLA or MOA or any of the big bad actors that we're dealing with, that's very different than the low consequence but high likelihood incidents we are going to see and will continue to see. So if you really look at some of the AI, the bar has been lowered. It's already a low bar in cyber. AI just made that bar almost down to the floor. Anyone can be a bad actor in this space. The question is, what is it we have to devote our resources, and what is the appropriate role of government vis-a-vis industry, vis-a-vis some of the owner-operators? And to me, I feel like we still struggle with that question in cyber. Put a 10x on it in terms of what we're going to be thinking about vis-a-vis AI, but I think we have an opportunity to actually do it right. I'm not opposed to regulation. I'm just opposed to a patchwork of regulations that disagree with one another. That's the way the cyber community grew up. There was no one bringing that all together and asking those fundamental questions.
So let me ask a question. Who could bring it together? Is it the US government? Is it DHS? Is it a government agency? Jeff, you've been involved with these questions.
Yeah, my big, I guess, thought on this is that internet problems are global problems, and you have to have global coalitions to address them. I mean, just think, just China, US, two superpowers in cyber. The manufacturers, the users, the inventors. Russia, I say they are the world class, like they can pee in your beer, right? They can make you have a very bad day, but they're not building anything. They're not selling anything, right? Who bought a Russian router? Who's using Russian 5G? Right? They're a non-player in building the global internet and participating in owner-operators of the global internet, right? But they're definitely an actor in making us have bad days. So there's not going to be one US regulator because the global internet people play different roles. So I think if I had to pick something, I'd say we need a really well-respected convener, a really well-respected coordinator, right, that moves toward trying to coordinate these ideas. Almost like an ICANN that tries to come up with standards around the global naming system, but nobody's going to allow a single entity to be the authority, right, the controller of it. And that's me coming from my sort of civil society internet governance.
Thompson, I want to hear your thoughts on that.
Sure.
Because I've got
I'll zoom out and make a larger point that I just think we really, really, really need the tech sector and the AI sector and the private side to be getting more reps of collaboration with the public sector, with the government. And we didn't get that for the last couple of decades, really, the first couple of decades of the internet. We have to have that in AI. And I think there's two pillars or two facets to that collaboration we need to see to those reps. One is just education, and that's going both ways. That's private sector companies educating policymakers and practitioners on what is this technology doing, where is it going, where is it advancing, what is it going to be able to, what can it do today, what we'll be able to do tomorrow, what are we seeing out there, right? And then policymakers educating private sector companies on what they're seeing. Obviously, people in the national security world have eyes on a lot of things that private sector companies do not. Where are they seeing the risks? Where are they seeing the threats? Where are they seeing their own gaps, right? And then the second pillar is actually deploying together, right? Getting reps building and deploying this technology together so that we can build that trust, build that expertise, and that's going to be the foundation of how we really address these problems at a local, at a global, and all these other different levels that Jeff is referencing.
So quick question. Is DeepSeek the new Huawei?
All eyes on you.
DeepSeek, I know everyone knows kind of the headlines of DeepSeek, but if you were to ask a Chinese venture capital investor a year ago, who are the big players in AI in China, they might have not even mentioned DeepSeek. They would have mentioned 6 companies that are mostly investees of Alibaba and Tencent in China. And it's like, oh yeah, and there's this little hedge fund called DeepSeek that is kind of experimenting with models and doing some pretty cool stuff. And then they kind of caught everyone off guard last summer with some releases that didn't really hit the press because it didn't make the stock market tank. But people watching this community realize there's this little crew called DeepSeek that's doing some really impressive stuff. And then obviously they became much more famous this January. But I mean, if you watch the nightly CCTV news, They are now sitting next to the CEO of Huawei in meetings with Xi Jinping on how industry and government can work together. But in terms of their own reps with the government, in their kind of deep presence throughout both kind of the Chinese structures of governance and footprint outside the world, they're not there yet, for sure.
Okay, I'm going to ask a question from the audience. And again, I encourage everybody to please send in questions, make them provocative. Let's make these folks uncomfortable if we can. So question, the panelists have been thoughtful and progressive in their feedback on the use of AI to defend against cyber threats. Their responses have been posed as if threat actors are foreign threat actors. Does their philosophy shift in regard to the use of AI for domestic threats?
No. Okay. It's funny I mean, crime is mostly local, right? The internet has allowed people to cross lines, but I don't, as a defender, if I'm building a system, I don't care where the packets are coming from. It doesn't matter to me, right? Maybe politically, maybe with law enforcement, maybe if I'm trying to recover some lost intellectual property, but a lot of times the attack is coming inside the cage. It's coming from the server above you, right? Somebody just got next to you, got in your address space, rented some colo space in your net block or whatever, and they're attacking you right there because that's the most efficient, convenient place to attack you. So if you're designing a defense, you don't care where it's really coming from, I would argue.
But it does impede or impact potentially the response, especially if you look at ransomware. Vast majority of the ransomware gangs are protected in countries that we lack extradition authorities and treaties with. And I would say ransomware was a big shift in the cybercrime model in that not only basically it democratized cybercrime. Everyone became a target as well. So if you play that out in the AI domain.
I totally agree with you. I mean, as a young hacker, people would route through, you'd always hop your attack through North Korea because they were never going to coordinate with anybody, right? You got to get through Russia, you got to get through France, you got to get a little
And they were
Brazil
state sponsors of crime.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, they're not just harboring, they are. That's how they are acting. But I think the other component of that question is the insider threat's probably going to take on even greater salience when it comes to AI.
Does AI become the insider threat?
That's what I was actually going to say. I think it could.
I mean, poison a training model a little bit. How would you detect that? I don't know.
Thompson, what are you guys doing?
I think it's a great question. Again, we have the world's best interpretability team to understand how these models work and how to steer them. So, good question.
So, Thompson, Anthropic positions itself as building constitutional AI, right? And placing alignment and safety at the center of its mission. What does alignment mean in a cybersecurity context? And how can you truly be aligned if a model can be jailbroken?
Great question, and there are people much smarter than me who try to answer this internally at Anthropic. I mean, I think one of the interesting aspects to this question, which is probably not obvious unless you're deep in the field, is, well, we use a phrase both internally and externally called helpful, honest, and harmless. We want our LLMs, the AI that we build, to be helpful, honest, and harmless. So all LLMs are helpful, right? And helpful can be good and helpful can be bad. If a bad actor is using a helpful-only model, they can use it to do really bad things, say build bioweapons, right? So we try to build in these safeguards and alignment mechanisms to make it not only helpful, but also harmless and honest. And this is hard stuff. You can do that at the model layer, and you can also do it at the product layer, which you can think of as kind of reactive safeguards when the model isn't yet safe yet on its own. And so on the alignment question, kind of you would think this would get harder as the models get more intelligent, but in some ways, you could hypothesize that it might actually get easier, because as the model is more intelligent and more aware and then more aligned, you can, if you prompt the model, the AI, to do something bad, but in a kind of jailbreaky way, we're kind of tricking it into doing something bad, because it is more intelligent, it might be able to better contextualize what you are trying to get it to do and ask questions around the context and contours of what you're trying to get it to do to make sure it doesn't do bad things. So it might be harder to trick, which means harder to jailbreak. And I think these are one of the things that we are grappling with in today's model capability or caliber, and then where it's going tomorrow.
So if Claude gets turned into an offensive weapon, what's the red line? What are the ethical or technical things that an AI company can do if their model is sort of doing things that really aren't good?
I mean, we're a closed model company. So it's a little easier for us to pull the plug on a customer using our models for cases that violate our acceptable use policy than, say, an open weights model. So those lines are drawn out pretty clearly in our AUP, our acceptable use policy. I think it's a great question for some of the models coming out of China, coming out of some labs in the US that are going out there open weights for anyone to use and fine tune.
Jeff, are you hearing anything in the conversation about having red lines with respect to how the models are used and what the response could be?
From a cybersecurity perspective, my only concern is that let's say you train it on secure coding practices, and it's got 20 years of history that it's trained on, but really the most relevant are only the last year or two. I don't want my code to be reflective of 15-year-old coding practices, but that's maybe statistically the weight of what's in that model, right? So if I'm a developer, or I'm using Claude or whatever, I would only want the most recent, most secure examples of the code to train on, right? And I'd want it to spit out and tell me, hey, we've detected these insecure patterns, right? Like, here's a tutorial on how to maybe rewrite your code in a more secure fashion. So if it was defensive and somebody's trying to intentionally create insecure code, I'd want the model to prevent insecure code examples from being generated.
Nilu, I don't think we've defined red lines, or not to be cute, but lines in the silicon for cyber either. And we have yet to genuinely articulate, and certainly not practice, a deterrent that is dissuading, deterring, and compelling all bad cyber actors. So the question is, I think we have to get to the point where we have a genuine deterrence theory. And the reality is you deter actors, not things alone. There are things that can cross that line, but ultimately, behind the clickety-clack of the keyboard, even if it goes automated in an AI environment, is a bad actor. So the question is how do we start having that discussion, which I think is in the early innings still in the cyber environment with signaling strategically. I think we have to start leaning into the AI discussion rather than always looking at it. The typical way is we let the bad guys define our strategies. We respond to what they initiate, and that suddenly becomes our strategy. That is silly. It's reactive, yet we do it over and over and over and over again. I really like Thompson's response to how that governance can come together, because it's taking all the public-private partnership discussion, which, not to be cute again, I've said is long on nouns, short on verbs, a whole lot of talk, a lot of discussion around information sharing. This is really about the reps in the gym on collaborations from an operational standpoint. CISA has its Joint Cyber Defense Collaborative. I think it's had some positives, some negatives. I think NSA needs something very similar to look at some of the more—
Cyber Collaboration Center.
Yes,
and the AI
but taking the
Security
Cyber Collaboration Center to the next level with industry in an operational setting. You only learn things in the foxhole.
I believe there's 800 industry
Active cyber
partners.
defense.
Yeah. This question of how you move away from a reactive cyber security posture to a proactive one, especially in the world of AI, is a wicked problem that a Wicked Problems Lab would be fantastic to take up. So I want to ask a question from the audience. While AI has significant promise, there are still significant and fundamental cybersecurity risks ranging from data provenance and data set poisoning to adversarial perturbations, hallucinations, Trojans, and beyond. How can we balance these risks with the potential benefits of AI, particularly in safety-critical and security-critical domains, where a move fast and break things mentality can be disastrous?
I'm not answering that one.
I mean, this is literally why Anthropic was founded. right? Our company kind of oddly was founded by 8 people, right? And most of them were co-authors on a paper called Scaling Laws that came out in January 2020, which identified this concept that is core to understanding the AI arms race, which is that if you just throw more compute, so more servers, more chips, and more data at these models, they get more intelligent without any real targeted innovations on the algorithms and training processes, right? And so all you needed was capital, right? To buy more servers and buy more data, throw them at these models, and these models would get more intelligent. But as they got more intelligent, this arms race took off. We didn't actually understand the models. We didn't understand how to steer them, how to control them, how to interpret them, right? And so this is scary to a lot of people in the space. Anthropic was founded specifically to do research on these problems so that as they became exponentially more intelligent, we understood them. And so I think it is one of the foundational questions that we are all grappling with in this space. And we often champion this idea of race to the top, where if we can be the most commercially and technologically successful company out there, and we are doing it safely, that will then spread best practices and kind of understandings of how to do it safely across the commercial space as well.
So Jeff, should every model have a kill switch? And if it did, who should own that kill switch?
I just think the incentives are such that no one would get near that kill switch for fear of their career. Why would you go near there? And so until you can answer that question, I don't think a lot of these conversations around safety make a lot of sense. I mean, they make sense on paper. I don't think anybody would use them in reality.
Frank, you were part of the Cybersecurity Solarium Commission. If there was an AI Solarium Commission, what would be the top issues it would want to tackle?
That's a great question, and I wish Mark Montgomery were here. He did yeoman's work as a staff director to make sure that our issues, and I give a lot of credit to Angus King and Mike Gallagher and included all the various members of Congress for them, Ben Sass as well as Jim Langevin and all the agency representatives at the time. They were really grounded in practical solutions. So most reports come up with big ideas, and I'm sure I'm the biggest proponent of that. But at the end of the day, it was grounded in actual things that needed to be legislated here and now. If I were to look at the AI sets of issues, I think the deterrence question has to be addressed because everything else has to underpin a strategic framework. And right now, it's sort of like kids' soccer. We're swarming balls here, we're swarming balls there. Nothing's bringing that all together. So I think you would have to start with a deterrent set of questions. You'll have to decide what it is you're actually defending, which may sound easy in theory. It's very hard in practice. And ultimately find 3 to 5 issues to start with that you can actually get legislative impact and support around. But to me, maybe it's just my background, deterrence is still the name of the game in all of this. And until we have some of those discussions in a more concerted kind of way, we're just going to have lots of little things pop up here, there, and everywhere. But have it grounded, have it impactful, have it informed by government, industry, and academia. Quite honestly, this is ground zero. This is where you can have the positive impact. Because quite honestly, the fact that you have DeepSeek may not have been on anyone's radar screen. Many of the greatest technologies, they never were on anyone's radar screen until people realized it too late.
So we have a question about AI and its impact on the workforce. Let's focus on the cybersecurity workforce for a second. What is AI's impact on the cybersecurity workforce going to be? And Jeff and I, you and I briefly talked about this. Google DeepMind announced that it can now find 0 days. Is that the end of the white hat hacker community, or what does this mean?
Yeah, they can find patterns of known exploits, but this is what, back in 2015 or so, DARPA had a Cyber Grand Challenge, completely, before AI was a very popular term, completely automated attack and defense, right? You hit the buttons, you step back, and the machines would attack, automatically defend, automatically patch the code. So this has been an area of deep research for decades. I'm glad Google has some results in this area, but it's by no means novel.
Would you ever assign your SOC to the black box of AI and take out the?
No, because the AI is battling the AI, and at some point why show up for work?
That's a different question.
Yeah. I think there are things that AI can do very well, right? Like, my take on it is let the humans do the highest value cognitive functions they can do. They understand business process. They understand risk. They understand relationships. They understand the implications of a system downtime, whatever. Super valuable. AI, not going to do that. So what AI can do, pattern match, super fast. Look at my logs. Look for anomalies. Give me predictions on bad behavior. The stuff that sucks the life out of the NOC engineer, right? Like, free up the human to do the high-value human thing.
Thompson, I think Anthropic has announced that by the end of the year, close to 70% of its code is going to be generated by AI, if I have that correct.
This is the point I wanted to touch on with regard to Jeff's comment. I think what it means that LLMs are getting very good at writing code is that we might assume that most of the code in the world in a couple years is written by large language models, by AI. And so what does that actually mean practically? It means that, and this is pretty much true already, anyone in this audience, whether you've ever written a line of code or not, can go build a website, can go build an app, can go build a game to play, can build a training module for yourself. Like, you can build software today without writing a line of code. And this is the first inning. So that will only get much, much easier. You'll build much more complex software without ever taking a CS class or ever writing a line of code. I have not worked in Jeff and Frank's worlds with regard to cybersecurity, but I would imagine that this will also proliferate the number of people who can write malware, who can write exploitations, right? Without ever having written a line of code themselves. So it is magnifying that threat vector for sure.
There's a funny meme I saw maybe about 2 weeks ago on Reddit. It's sort of like how it started, how it's going. And it was this guy's like, hey guys, I've written my own site. I don't even know how to write software. And people are paying for this. This is great. Everybody should do this. Next one is, it's complaining that my API tokens are exhausted and my login credential is, it's like, yeah, that's what you get.
In terms of the workforce, though, you've got to have AI awareness, just like you need cyber awareness. And if you're in the cybersecurity field and you're not AI enabled, you're in the wrong business. Because at the end of the day, it is going to enable, but I still think that human in the loop, for lack of a better term, call me old school, it will matter because there's a different set of skills they're bringing. So firstly, on the offensive side, I want someone who swore to the Constitution always pushing a button. I don't want that to be fully automated unless it's under a threshold that is low. So to me, that should be the case.
So how does it change what universities should do with, sorry, Jeff.
Oh, no, I just have a follow-up on that. Tony Sager, who used to run the defensive branch of the NSA before that was reorganized, he used to have the saying that was, you can never go head-to-head with your opponent. There's just too many potential opponents. So you have to automate everything. So you have to ruthlessly go throughout your infrastructure, your organization, identify, come up with a plan, and automate everything. You got to do it. And then for everything that you can't automate, you have to automate, right? And I think AI is going to help with that. For everything else, you must automate, right? Before, we were really good at the first part. We didn't really have the tools to automate everything else. And I'm hoping AI allows us to eat into that part of the final problem.
What's funny is when you scale a company or an organization, a version of that is hiring more people. Yeah. Right? Like, okay, I've kind of figured this thing out, and I'm going to hire someone to own that while I take on the next thing, right? And you keep hiring more people. It's like a form of automation. AI will be able to do a lot of that, right? Instead of hiring someone there, I'm going to just scale that with AI, right? And then that person maybe can oversee that piece in a different way. Yeah.
So in this world, as AI keeps scaling, does it increase or decrease the likelihood of unintended escalation? Yes, Jeff.
I worry that there's essentially 5 or 6 AI companies. So when you talk about AI this and AI that, all I hear in my mind is Microsoft, Google, Anthropic, OpenAI. You know, there's like a handful of companies. So essentially we're saying the handful of companies that will do this for the planet, the handful of companies that will sell this model to the planet. And I worry that we're concentrating risk. You have these super empowered individuals, like if Sam Altman wakes up tomorrow and decides to steer the company in a different direction, that's what they're doing, right? And so I just, like we've seen with email and routing and everything else on the internet, to get more efficiencies, more productivity gains, we've concentrated and specialized. And in return, we get a more fragile and less, a more fragile internet with less redundancy. And as we race and need more GPUs, I'm just worrying we're boxing ourselves in. You know, in a legal sense, it's sort of an attractive nuisance. There's only 5 companies to regulate, right? It's not like me as a developer or me running a website. I'm one of 100 million websites out there. There's only 5 of these AI companies or something. It's just a lot of eggs in a few baskets.
Do you think explanation for a model should be a regulatory requirement or not? Does it matter?
I think the secret is, and please correct me, I think a lot of the secret is in the weights.
I think it also depends on the capability level.
Yeah.
The more intelligent it becomes, right, the risks also increase. And so I think when the risks get to some point, this is kind of core to our RSP, our responsible scaling policy, then I think the requirements before you have a release also go up as well.
Okay, so we have 15 seconds left. If you could launch one policy, one law, one change in how we operate, what would that be? Lightning round. 1 second or less each.
Okay, I got it. If I could do it, I would go hire 10% of the top AI talent in China.
Which would result in?
Well, there's a prediction that the top 10% in a chip fabrication plant, if 10% of the people in a chip fabrication plant are missing, the fabrication plant stops operating. So I just go find the brightest minds in fabrication and in AI, and I just bring them to America, give them a house and a car. I mean, or spend trillions of dollars on defense. I don't know. You know.
On that note, I want to please join me in thanking the panel for a great conversation.